Dad, Chat Sports, we are here to talk about football. Yes, it's preseason, but who cares? It's actual football. There are roster cuts that need to be made, and we're talking about all of them today from the Minnesota Vikings game. Final score, 34-25. Yes, the Saints lost, but it's not so much the final score, it's who really stood out. And if you want to talk about one of the great preseason quarterback performances in the history of Saints football, look no further than the two biggest winners from last night, Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill. They destroyed last night. Perfection from them. Well, not quite perfection, but they were very good. Teddy went 14-19 as the starter, went up against a lot of the Minnesota Vikings first-string defense, threw for 134 yards and no touchdowns. Yes, the Saints offense could have been better in the red zone. They had to settle for field goals, which we will get to in just a moment. But Teddy fought through drops. He looked great in the pocket. Remember, he did have a start last year for the Saints. That was in week 17 when he wasn't really able to get his own groove. It was a game the Saints kind of put all their backups in because they already had the 1 seed locked up. So Teddy went out there and had a rough game. But I was at that game. The dome, everything about it was completely different. So Teddy Bridgewater in a game with everyone locked in, it was fantastic. He looked sharp. He looked very comfortable in the pocket. And even when you don't include the plays that show up in the stat sheet, there was a play where Teddy Bridgewater was getting sacked from his blind side, and it normally results in a strip sack. He was able to hold on to the football. In other words, he looked strong. This guy could be a future Saints quarterback. He's very comfortable. He's very accurate. He understands the offense. And one thing I love about Teddy Bridgewater, he enjoys being a backup. You saw it all last year when the Saints were winning. He was one of the lead dancers in the locker room after big games. So having this guy, an experienced playoff quarterback on the roster as your backup quarterback, makes you wonder if he's possibly the best quarterback the best backup quarterback in the NFL, backing up who was just voted the best quarterback in the NFL, Drew Brees. So Drew took no snaps. He was dressed out. He had the iPad or the tablet helping out Teddy Bridgewater on the sideline. One thing Teddy said in the postgame that was interesting was he was going up against his old team, and he felt as if that was kind of like a practice, and it maybe made it a little easier. He was very familiar with some of the calls that they were making. So it's going to be interesting to see how he performs against a team he's not familiar with whatsoever. But he was extremely accurate, very smart with the football, took his checkdowns when needed to. Taysom Hill was fantastic. First thing, if you didn't watch the game at all, the interception, the pick six, was not his fault at all. The ball was thrown accurately to tight end Dan Arnold. He bobbled it and basically tossed it to a linebacker. One of the worst interceptions from a receiver standpoint that I've ever seen. So that wasn't on him. Taysom Hill went up against lower level defenses, a lot more backups than Teddy did, but still, he was 8 of 14 for 80 yards and that interception. But this is where Taysom really stood out, running the ball. We all know he's Mr. Swiss Army knife. He returns kicks. He's great on punt coverage. They use him as a running back. They use him as a quarterback. They use him as a receiver, a tight end, an H-back. He does everything for the Saints. And as an actual quarterback, when he was allowed to focus on being a quarterback last night, he was amazing. His ability to get out of pressure, his ability to step up in the pocket, to run for those extra yards was amazing. 6 carries for 45 yards. You would like to see him in a quarterback role, not take so many hits like he did last night, but that's just who he is. That is truly who he is. He is a powerful runner. When it comes to actually running the ball, there are a few quarterbacks I would take over Taysom Hill with the ball in his hands. He's that dynamic. He looked that great. So we're going to open up with an audience question here. If Drew Brees were to go down, okay, starting quarterbacks always get injured. Do you want Teddy Bridgewater to go in as your backup, or would you feel better as Taysom Hill as your backup? We all know Teddy is more than likely going to be that strong number 2 guy. But you know, with Taysom Hill, the one thing you get out of him as a backup quarterback, if Drew were to go down, is something the defense didn't even prepare for at all. He is someone completely different. So, I think it's a little bit more of an open question. Who do you believe? Let me know and why below. I'm still sticking with Teddy B. He looks that fantastic. The Saints offense will still be able to run through him. And something else that was interesting, Pete Carmichael Jr. called a good bit of the offense last night, the Saints offensive coordinator, instead of the normal Sean Payton. Let's go to winner number 2, Latavius Murray. He did everything for the Saints last night. Running, catching, elusiveness. The most impressive thing, I've always known he can run the ball between the tackles, but he made some amazing catches. Early on in the game, he was able to move the chains, make a guy miss, and get that extra yard to move the marker. I was really impressed with Latavius Murray. He's had limited snaps so far in the preseason. When the game actually happened, he looked great. Once again, like Teddy Bridgewater, he went up against a lot of the number 1s for the Minnesota Vikings. And once again, like Teddy Bridgewater, that's his former team. So, it's going to be interesting to see how he performs against other teams. Nevertheless, that shouldn't really take away from Teddy or Latavius Murray's fantastic look in the first preseason game for the Who Dat Nation. Don't miss a Saints video. Subscribe to Chat Sports now. Guess what? We have the best Cowboys coverage in the country. Downey and the crew, they are fantastic. Like Chat Sports on all social medias. But most importantly, subscribe so you don't miss a video. Moving on to winner number 3, the New Orleans Saints offensive line. Great pass protection all night. They only gave up 2 sacks, which is an amazing number because you are shuffling in and out so many different players. The person that stood out the most, center Erik McCoy, the 2nd-round pick, the Saints' highest draft pick. They moved up to get McCoy, and he looked amazing for the Saints as the starting center. And I think he is the odds-on favorite to start as a rookie for the Saints. Now, for the other offensive line positions, I'm going to be interested to see what they do with Nick Eason, who they brought over in the offseason. Do they move him to guard? Does he start at all? What about the former LSU product who's from Brother Martin High School in New Orleans, Louisiana, Will Clapp? Will's an amazing player because in college he played a lot of center, he played a lot of guard. Last year for the Saints, he was a very key piece to the offensive line because he could play a lot of different positions. Where does he fit as a backup? Does he make the roster? How about someone like Cameron Tom? So, Saints offensive line cuts, it's going to be tough. You normally like to roll with 8 offensive linemen, maybe 9. We all know Ryan Ramczyk's going to be there and Teron Armstead. So that's going to be interesting to keep up with. But Erik McCoy, the Saints' highest draft pick, looked fantastic. Winner number 4, the Saints special teams units. Will Lutz was a record-setting kicker for the Saints last year with his accuracy. He couldn't have been better last night. 4 of 4 on field goals, and that's great. Maybe that also says that the Saints' red zone offense needs to be better, but Will Lutz was money last night. Also, kickoff return coverage was great. Special teams coverage was great overall. So it's good. Will Lutz make kicks. We all expect that. On to player number 5. In winner number 5, I'm going to go with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, a rookie safety out of Florida. Now, we didn't really get to see him all that much, but this young man hustled all over the field, took a bad angle on one tackle, was able to catch back up with the running back a little bit later. I love this kid coming out of Florida. I think he has great potential as a special teamer, and I think he has great potential as a backup to the Saints safeties right now, Von Bell and Williams in the back end. So Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, on a key two-point conversion try, took on an offensive lineman and was able to tackle the quarterback for the Vikings before he was able to score. That play stood out to me more than any other on film. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson out of Florida looked the part last night. Now let's run through the rest of the Saints preseason schedule. Coming up on Sunday, the Saints will play at the Los Angeles Chargers Sunday, August 18th. That game will kick off at 4 p.m. Eastern. Also, Saturday, August 24th, the Saints will travel up to go play the JETS Jets. That game will kick off at 7:30 Eastern Time. And then on Thursday, August 29th, the Saints will end their preseason against the Miami Dolphins. That game will kick off at 8 Eastern. Now on to the losers. Let me start by saying we should never take too much away from a preseason game, even on the winner side, and especially on the loser side. People have bad games. This is a meaningless game. What I'm about to say is not by any means insolid. A lot can change. But the big loser tonight, the Saints defense, especially in the first half. Now, Kirk Cousins to Adam Thielen, that was a crazy throw and catch. That happens. But even after that, Sean Mannion should not be cutting you up. But he did. And the Saints offense, while they look great, the Saints defense was horrible. In the first half, the Saints gave up 270 yards of offense. Now, listen, the Saints offense was able to respond with 168 yards of their own and an amazing 2-minute drive from Teddy Bridgewater. However, the Saints did get a fumble recovery that was total luck. Total luck. The Vikings running back just literally dropped the ball, and the Saints recovered it. It was very bizarre. So, the defense was horrible. Tackling was bad. Yards per play was bad. And the second half wasn't that much better. Yardage, it came out to 460 for the Vikings to 337 for the Saints. I understand Cam Jordan didn't play. I understand Marshawn Lattimore and your usual suspects didn't play the normal amount of snaps. But all these backup defensive backs, a lot of them were burned, especially in man coverage. And this was a big point of emphasis this year. What can the Saints get out of Marcus Davenport, the player that they moved up for in last year's draft, number 14 overall pick? He didn't really do anything. In fact, he was stalemated quite a bit. So, I'm concerned. You should be concerned. The Saints defense did not look good at all. So, audience question for you guys. Do you think the Saints will be a top 15 defense next season? All I'm asking for with that great offense is to have a top half of the league defense. Last year, they ranked in total yards and in points 14th in the NFL. Can they be a top 15 D? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Do you think they'll be better than top 15? Do you think they'll be a top 10 D? Or do you think this will be a bottom 5, bottom 10 D? Let's discuss in the comments. And as everyone else can attest, I respond to as many comments as I possibly can. It's Chat Sports. We get thousands of them. But please comment below. Moving along to some other losers from last night. This is once again just picking a few. I don't like to just destroy someone over a preseason performance, but Tre'Quan Smith had a horrible drop early. Now, he did have 2 catches for 16 yards, but that was a bad drop, and the Saints really need him to step up behind Michael Thomas and behind Ted Ginn Jr. Also, JACQUIZZ Rodgers dropped the 2-point conversion, and Dan Arnold, while he did have a ridiculous touchdown catch, he also dropped a huge pass, and that led to a pick 6. Now listen, people, listen. The Saints have a lot of great young wide receiver roster options, and there's not so many slots. Cyril Grayson Jr., had a great kickoff return and 2 catches for 32 yards. Lil'Jordan Humphrey, a lot of people have been waiting for him to break out this year. 2 catches, an amazing touchdown reception, 42 yards, looked amazing. Simi Cobbs Jr., a catch and 11 yards. Saints, you have all these players you can go to. Keith Kirkwood, Austin Carr, Rashard Matthews, Traven Durrell. So this is why Tre'Quan Smith needs to step up, because he needs to worry about his own roster slot. I do believe he will make it, but last night showed that the Saints have a lot of different options that they can work in at wide receiver. Also at running back, the Saints, we know Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray is going to be 1-2. Who's next? Is it JACQUIZZ Rodgers? He had 5 carries for 15 yards, 3 catches for 13 yards, but that 2-point conversion drop was gigantic. Divine Ozigbo, that was a huge pickup for the Saints out of Nebraska. 3 carries for 20 yards, 1 catch for 9 yards. He looked fantastic. You also have Dwayne Washington, 8 carries for 36 yards. Who's going to be that number 3 running back? JACQUIZZ Rodgers comes over from the Falcons. I don't know. It's going to be very competitive. I think I would go with Ozigbo right now at this very second. And at that tight end position, they brought in A.J. Derby, who was a good player for the Broncos for quite a bit. So Dan Arnold's got to worry about getting that number 3 tight end spot behind Cook and Hill. So he did have that great touchdown, but that pick 6 was horrible. Another loser from last night, pass interference reviews. Oh my God, can the Saints ever get a good pass interference call to go their way in the Superdome? We all remember the NFC Championship game, but this was horrible, because Sean Payton said, hey, I'm going to challenge this really bad pass interference call. This is new to the league. This is basically the Saints and Rams rule, where you can review pass interference calls. He threw the red flag. Kevon Webster versus Laquan Treadwell, 4:41 left to go in the third. I reviewed it plenty of times. I think that's a no call. Terry McCauley, who's a rules expert, a former referee, thought it was a great call. I'm going to just throw this out to you guys. Do you think defensive pass interference this year, the reviews, are going to be a disaster? Do you think this is actually a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Let me know in the comments, please, because this looks as if this is going to be a mess. I was pro pass interference review everything for a long time. I don't know now. I simply don't know, because it is such a bang call. Let's discuss in the comments, okay? And I want to connect with you guys on social media at Carter the Power. Check it out. Instagram, Twitter, all the good stuff. Snapchat at Carter the Power. And the last loser from last night, it's us, the fans, the consumers, because people last night went to the Dome, paid for a ticket. They didn't get to see Drew Brees. They didn't get to see Cameron Jordan. I know that they probably should have knew that going in, and a lot of people probably didn't care. They probably still had a good time. But still, it's expensive to go to an NFL game, and it is bad for us as fans because we have 3 more preseason games. Why can't the regular season get here? Come on. I'm ready for that Week 2 game against the Rams. Forget Week 1. Week 2. I'm telling you, I can't wait for that revenge. I want to see it. Chat Sports, thank you guys so much. All your Saints coverage is right here. Let's subscribe. Let's hang out. Let's go get a daiquiri at Pat O's. Let's do it, baby. Let's do it.